I have been thinking about the role of hope in a situation where there is none. I'm not sure I have answers, but if you will join me, I will share my musings with you. Hi, it's Margaret Maloney, and welcome to Season 3 of the Death Dhamma podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so appreciative that you are part of my community. And yet, I seek not to be attached to the idea of the podcast or even to the idea of our community. And that's our topic this season: attachment, clinging, and aversion. What happens when we really want something? What happens when we really don't want something? And what does it do to our suffering and dissatisfaction? Let's dive in and find out a little bit more with today's episode. We go through these difficult situations in life. There are times when a positive outcome seems unlikely. Maybe there's a 5% chance, or maybe there's no chance, but still, we hope. Is that wrong? Should the hope overshadow the concept of the reality? And where does hope turn into clinging? Years ago, a friend of mine told me that both of her young children had contracted chickenpox. And I replied to her that in some ways this was a good thing, because at that time, the majority of the population got chickenpox, and it was easier for children to have chickenpox than it was for adults. Woo, boy, I really said the wrong thing. My friend was so upset with me, and she chastised me because why should her children have to suffer at all? Perhaps someday, she told me, perhaps someday there would be a chickenpox vaccine and her kids would not have to have chickenpox ever. Now, she was right. Several years later, a vaccine was introduced, not in time to prevent her children from the itchy suffering, but now most children in the United States do not get chickenpox. In that scenario, she had hope, and I think given the time period and the prevalence of chickenpox as a childhood illness, I had realism. Obviously, this is a discussion that, has been many years. It sticks with me. Of course, I still remember it. And this week, as I consider episode 12, Casey Howe, Insights into Attachment and Compassion Fatigue, and then my follow-up, episode 13, Embracing Non-Attachment, Why Taking Action and Making Plans Matter, plus some writing I did for Buddhist Door, an article called The Art of Caring, Embracing the Journey of Providing Love with Expectations. These thoughts around being with the sick and the dying and providing care and avoiding compassion fatigue by not being attached to outcome, all of these things are with me. They're all swirling around in my head. And now I'm trying to work it all out, right? So now I'm sharing them as part of my journal and part of our time together to get a sense of it. So thanks for listening to all that, right? When someone is sick or injured, or you are sick or injured, we hope for healing. And in many cases, healing is an option. And we go beyond hope. We take actions. We rest if that's what's called for, take the proper medicine and nourishment, and perhaps do the right exercises. And it can be realistic to expect or hope for a certain degree of recovery. I start with this example because I find this to be easier. Mostly, this is an area where I wonder about clinging, and my thoughts they go like this. If someone heals to a certain point, and that point is what was expected, and yet this person insists on striving for more, isn't this clinging? For example, the person is told that he or she will never walk again, and he or she rejects that opinion and works to exceed expectations. Are they motivated, or is this madness? And as I write this, I can see it's not really my place to judge. And judge is an important word. I'm considering this scenario with a person, having hope that exceeds a certain definition of realism. And I'm considering this clinging to an outcome. And what I'm seeing is that I'm inserting my own definition of positive and negative. Oh, clinging is bad. I can walk around understanding that clinging can lead to suffering, but I don't need to apply that to other people's situations. There are people who exceed expectations in their recoveries, and often it is because they refused to accept a diagnosis and they did cling, right? So they had hope and they clung to an idea, and perhaps it was, beyond what we thought was realistic, what the doctors thought was realistic, but that's what they did. And it's not my place to label that good clinging or bad clinging or label it at all. I also think that, I think about my father as he was going through his terminal lung cancer. And he did such a great job in terms of expressing his acceptance. And some of you have already heard me say that Dad used to say, nobody gets out of this alive. And another thing he did when he was having a good day, he would remind us that he was still dying. Now, that may sound strange, and it wasn't like in some negative way, like, he was having a good day, and so he was like, hey, I'm still dying over here. It wasn't like that. It was that he was looking for, I believe, this kind of balance. And that, when because he had some good days and we had some fun outings and things in the midst of his last few months on this planet. And so I can remember one day in particular, he was like, I feel really good today, and I would like us to take a road trip. And I'm not up to driving, but Margaret, if you will drive, let's go take this road trip. And we all went off to this destination that was, a fun, favored destination, and certainly one that I think was he and my mom, it was like one of their favorite places to go. And we did it. And throughout that process, though, he found a way to kind of gently slip in, like, I'm going to say it in my way. This isn't how my dad said it, but it was kind of like, don't get attached to this good day, or don't let the meaning of this good day go beyond anything other than today I'm having a good day. Nothing has changed in my diagnosis, right? So that's true. So, and I'll say in a tactful and loving way, he would remind us. And that was so helpful. They did find a medication that was really good and provided him relief for many of his symptoms. And it meant that instead of having 6 weeks to live, he had 6 months. But there was no hope that medication, I don't know why I can't say medication, everyone, medication. Thank you for listening to me while I practice saying medication. And I think let's just all take a moment here and acknowledge this, because in this context, I'm used to saying meditation, aren't I? So anyway, thank you for that. So there was no hope that this medication was a cure. Now, some might hope that during, a time, a new treatment would emerge, so that perhaps while this medication helped him and lessened the severity of his symptoms and definitely gave us more time together, maybe there would be hope that during that time a cure would come, or there'd be another thing that would prolong his life until we got to the next cure. And I mean, that is something that happens to people, right? There's somebody I interviewed last year, a man who's been living with a difficult form of cancer in stage 4 for years. And he fully believes that eventually, he will probably die from it. It will catch up with him, as the saying goes. But in the meantime, he has been able to go from, treatment to treatment and new treatments and things that have allowed him to stay here and enjoy his time with his family. And that's how it can be. But so, in this instance, there wasn't hope that there was going to be a new treatment that was going to emerge. And I never really had thoughts about that. And I also didn't speak about that much with others, and this is why. Some people think when you have that acceptance that someone you love is dying, sometimes people think of that as being fatalistic, or that, I was attracting negative energy. In some ways, I guess this ties back to the difference between me and my observation about my friend's children having chickenpox and her desire that her children should never have had to suffer with chickenpox at all. It's not like I was glad that they had chickenpox. I just thought, well, since they have chickenpox, this is good. We've gotten this over with. I wasn't glad that my father was dying. I wasn't plotting his demise. If a treatment had come along, that would have been great. But for me, it was easier to prepare for the more difficult outcome, the more likely outcome, because I knew that, well, I was aware logically that everything that rises ceases and that everyone will die. I had some work to do to get to the place where I could begin to let go of my attachment to my father being alive in this world with me. And 2 years later, went through a very similar process, same exact kind of cancer with my husband. And it's the same thing. It's not like I was walking around wanting death to come, but I knew that death was coming. And if there had been, some new treatment presented and it made sense to him to try it, then that would have been great. But neither of us ever attached ourselves to the hope of some new thing coming along. I guess we, kind of joined together in the process or journey of moving towards when he was going to die. And Casey Howe, who I mentioned earlier, who was a guest on a couple of episodes ago, he knew my husband and me. And now it's meditation, so I can say meditated, not medication. He meditated with us while we were going through hospice. And he would often say, the living are dying and the dying are living. He wasn't extending false hope or trying to get us to be attached to the idea of Ed living. This expression was teaching us we don't know when. We know an expected outcome. We don't know what else will happen on the way. We have this moment right now, and this was very reassuring. In that moment, we could meditate. And I realize, that this expression can also help with any concerns around clinging to, whether or not somebody will die or not die or when. Eventually, of course, we all die. We don't know when or how. We have this moment. And it's not wrong to hope. And it's not wrong to accept an expected outcome. It's the clinging to a desired outcome. That is what will bring me suffering. I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your own stories about attachment. So follow this link, I'm going to read it to you in a minute here, to leave me a 90-second message with your ideas and suggestions. You can go to https://www.speakpipe.com/death_Dhamma_podcast. I suppose you could also just use your favorite search engine to say SpeakPipe Death Dhamma Podcast. And there you can record an audio message for me. And be sure to come over to margaretmaloney.com. That's MargaretMeloni.com and join the community. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma Podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.